Elizabeth, Andrew, thank you so much for being here.
So nice to be here, Mateo. It's great to finally have a conversation with you.
Elizabeth, today we're going to be talking a little bit about the sales profession. How is it changing? How technology is becoming an ally for sales, or what challenges exist from the new technology. But we're going to do that by talking about your story, your profession, and how you grew in the sales world and how you got to where you are today, right? And for the benefit of the audience, I want to start with the basics. What do you do today for a living?
Sure. So today I'm actually an entrepreneur. I'm CEO and co-founder of Sales Compete, which is a Slack app that's bringing back that in-office sales floor energy to remote and hybrid sales teams. I also do quite a bit of consulting and coaching and sales front on my own, coaching founders and CEOs of early stage startups, a little bit of speaking and just trying to help people get into the profession of sales, and I'm loving it.
Very good. And how did you get started in the whole sales profession? When you were growing up and when you were a child, were you thinking, okay, I'm going to go into sales, this is something I like, or was it by accident? How did that happen?
Yeah, great question. I think, it's funny. I don't know if many salespeople grow up planning, dreaming to be a salesperson, like you might be a doctor or something like that. I fell into sales. And this is really a very relevant conversation when you talk about how the profession of sales has changed, because I started back when carrying a bag was carrying a bag. I started many, many years ago as an investment wholesaler, long before technology was in the forefront. And I helped Wells Fargo Asset Management build their very first mutual fund company. I started by building an inside sales team. There were about 4 of us, and we took it from 0 to over $1 billion in assets for Wells Fargo. And we built an inside sales team. I hired, trained, and managed 15 inside sales people. And then the last region that we went into as a sales organization was the Northeast of the US. And because that was sort of the mutual fund capital of the world, the way the San Francisco Bay Area has kind of become the technology center of the world, certainly before the pandemic. And so they asked me to go open up that region. So I did. I moved from California to Boston in January. I had never really experienced winter like that before. And I was working out of my house in my car, calling on stockbrokers. And, it was all in-person sales, field sales. And I took that region from 0 to 70 million in sales. But it was, it was ground up. It was 0 to 1, literally opening a phone book of stock brokerage firms, the Merrill Lynch, Smith Barneys of the world, and calling on them and building from that. So I did have a very, very good foundation early on. When I started out in the investment industry, I was trained by some of the top institutional mutual fund wholesalers in the world. So I really learned my whole sales process and how to build repeatable sales processes very, very early on. And I've used that in everything I've done, literally, in my career. When I was transferred to the East Coast, again, I was in my late 20s, early 30s. My family said, go for 2 years, have a great time, don't fall in love. I ended up marrying a New Yorker, and I spent 20 years on the East Coast, 17 years of those as a stay-at-home mom. So after several years of building the New England region for the Wells Fargo Overland Express funds, I ended up getting married and moving down to New York, and I was a stay-at-home mom. In those 17 years, when I was raising my kids, I did a ton of nonprofit work and volunteer work, which interestingly is harder than anything I've ever done professionally, because you're dealing with volunteers and you can't fire them. And, but it wasn't until I took all of that volunteer work off my resume that I was able to get back to work. In 2011, I moved back to the San Francisco Bay Area with my family and decided it was time to get back to work. And my kids were a little bit older. And so I found, Mateo, that I was completely unemployable. nobody would hire me. At that time particularly, it was not, it was very frowned upon to have a career break or a career gap, and certainly for 17 years. But what I really did is I kind of created a sales plan for myself, selling myself to get back to work. And I found my first job on Craigslist, of all things, and working for Putnam Investments. And I did that for about a year. I was in San Francisco, and I just felt like there's no fun to be had in financial services anymore. And as long as I was reinventing myself, why not try tech? And so I was able to launch a career in technology in my late 40s with no tech background after a 17-year career break in San Francisco. And it's been really, really great. I started my first role in technology and sales operations, working for a healthcare tech startup. And I did that for about a year. Unfortunately, the company ran out of funding and went bankrupt. So I found myself in another job search, but at least I had already broken into tech, and I was able to find a sales job as an IC selling for a company by the name of HelloSign. You may have heard of HelloSign. And so that was a really exciting run. I was there about 4.5 years through the acquisition at Dropbox, and moved into leadership. And so had a really great run there. And then I've been a 3-time VP of sales, and then left at the end of 2022, my last company, which was an AI company, as VP of sales. And then I started on the entrepreneurial journey. So that's kind of a long-winded story, but it's a little bit of an unusual background for technology, certainly.
It's a beautiful story. I share. So my career is not as impressive as yours. The one thing I share is that I come from a different background. I'm an attorney, and I worked for 13 years in outsourcing, leading operations and vendor management type roles, et cetera, et cetera. And during the last 3 years, I got into technology and into entrepreneurship and into sales, right? I wasn't working in sales. I started leading sales at the company that I now lead as a CEO as well. And that brought me to, it brought a huge admiration for a profession that I used to disrespect, right? I used to think about salespeople like, yeah, no. And now I understand the focus it requires, the resilience it builds, and that it requires as well, the business acumen, and how you're driving at the end of the day companies. So this, I just have to admit that, and many times I think everyone should get a training in sales, because of all of the nice things that you will learn that will make you respect the profession and understand the business better, and understand how you need to support sales for them to achieve what they need to achieve. But I have a million follow-up questions for your story. I love your story. First follow-up question: how hard it is to sell to a stockbroker? How much time do you have? I mean, those guys operate at 1,000,000 miles per hour. How was it to like, you needed like a very short pitch? How did you structure that and turn that into a repeatable process, like you said?
Well, it's interesting because certainly in the Northeast too of the US, it was a notorious, and this is back, a couple of decades ago, right? So it was an old boys network. I mean, I would sometimes be giving a presentation for, downtown Boston, office of Merrill Lynch or one of the big firms. And, there'd be a couple hundred stockbrokers, and I would be the only woman in the room. They were 99.9% white men that looked like my dad at that time, so it was a different game. I think it really, it gave me thick skin, of course. And, I grew up with a father that I respected, tremendously, and 2 older brothers. And, but you'd have the hecklers in the back of the room, and, it was not for the faint of heart. I found in that region particularly, it was, as a female from the West Coast breaking into that, it was easy to get appointments, because I had a news story, but it was very, very difficult to establish credibility. And, that was something that I was able to do, which I was really proud of, was to, to be able to, establish the credibility with the market and all of my prospects, and to be able to take it from 0 to 70 million in sales. So, it was a challenge, but I love a challenge.
Is that something that you brought in with you, and then after after 17 years of being a stay-home mom, and when you need to go back into the job market, were you thinking like, hey, if I was able to conquer that old boys network club type situation, I mean, there's really nothing I cannot do, right? Because you knew you had
Yeah.
that in you. Were you thinking about that?
Absolutely. And I'm actually writing a book. I'm about halfway done, and hopefully I'll get that done this year. But I sort of start out with the story of one of the first times that I was getting in an elevator to go up, a high rise to give a lunch meeting for one of these big offices, with my hands sweating, and the nerves that I had going into some of those meetings, and really breaking into that region. And when I started to see the success there, it gave me the confidence that I needed, that I could do anything in my career. And so I think, one of the things that we'll probably dive into a little bit is like, kind of it's the challenges that make us stronger, right? So, it gave me the guts to be able to break into technology, because in technology, it was a very different story. Breaking into technology, after 20 years, it was not a gender issue as much as an age issue. There aren't a lot of people that break into technology in their late 40s with no tech background in San Francisco in 2011, certainly. There was ageism for sure, so I had a different challenge. I oftentimes laugh. I went from being the only woman in the room to the oldest person in the room.
And another follow-up question about the West versus East Coast. So you lived 17 years, you grew up in the West Coast, and then you lived 17 years in the East Coast, and then you're back in the West Coast.
Yes.
Are stereotypes kind of accurate? Are New York people, are they just living more stressed out lives than people in California? Are those stereotypes only? What's your take on that after, all of those years in both different places?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a very interesting, and I think that's really contributed to a lot of the strength that I've built. I mean, when I was doing volunteer work I was living in Connecticut, in a suburb of New York. I was volunteering and doing event planning and fundraising for nonprofits with mostly women that came out of really great careers in New York. Very intelligent, successful women that had their own careers. And so I learned a ton in those roles. I mean, a lot of, I joke oftentimes, but some of the nonprofit committees that I was on, they could have planned the Battle of Normandy. I mean, these were very, well-educated people. And it's a different lifestyle. There's an intensity in the Northeast that is different. And I think that's helped me. And it's really interesting now, because we are in a situation where, ever since the pandemic, the economy has changed and the market has changed, and we're dealing with layoffs and interest rates going up. And, I've been through a number of down markets in my career and in my lifetime. And a lot of people that are in sales now, have never, I have a son who's a SDR at a company, a tech company. There's a lot of people that have never seen a down market before. And, in this kind, it was really amazing to me when I got into technology that, when I started out, there was no such thing as inbound. We didn't have, the marketing funnel and the lead generation that we have today. And, and it was shocking to me, in some tech companies, all you need to be a top producer is to be up next in the rotation. And now the market's changed, and that's not the case anymore. And you have to be a little more resourceful, and you have to, go out and generate your own pipeline, and you have to, be process oriented in order to be outbound driven and build your own pipeline. And so I think it's really helpful having it used to be when I started in technology in 2011, everybody in the tech world in San Francisco demonized Wall Street. It was everybody has this image that it is the Wolf of Wall Street, and that wasn't the case. I mean, there was some of that, right? But there were millions and millions of honest, hardworking, successful people on Wall Street, just like there is in technology. And I'm sure in 20 years, we're going to look back and everybody's going to think that everybody that was in tech was like Elon Musk or, Elizabeth Holmes. It's just not the case, right? So, but a lot of the kind of, the old school versus new school tactics, I think are things that we really need to revisit, and getting back to being full sales cycle sellers and all that sort of thing. So I think it helps to have some of that, the toughness of the East Coast, along with the innovation of the West Coast.
Do you miss New York? Do you ever go back from time to time, or?
I really haven't been back since I moved here. And I think so much of it has been, I became a single mom. I was raising 3 kids. I was relaunching a career. And so when it would come to having vacation time, I'd want to go to Mexico or, go sit on a beach or, rather than New York. But I love New York. I really miss people. I spent half of my adult life out there, and, I have a lot of really dear friends that I haven't seen and, haven't really had the time to, keep in touch with as much as I would have liked to. So, I certainly miss people, and I do love New York. But I love San Francisco and I love California, and I don't see myself ever moving back there.
What's your place in the world? California, if you had to define like my place in the world is where?
Yeah, it's my people. I mean, I knew right away when I was back that, I was with my people. Now, San Francisco and the Bay Area, part of the reason I'm down in the San Diego area now, living for a while, has been going through a tough time. I'm sure you've heard in that the Bay Area is going through some challenges. It's still a beautiful city, and, it's going to take some time. Hopefully we'll, get back to a thriving city. But, it is, I do love the lifestyle of California, despite all of the challenges we have.
Let's go now to a little bit about salespeople. What do you like about sales today? Right? When you are doing consulting, when you are talking to so many people in the sales world, when you're talking to your son, what gets you excited, right? It's maybe Sunday, you're thinking about the week and you are in the sales world. What drives
Right.
you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, when it comes to, one of the things that I love about startups, and I've been through a couple of exits, and, I spent a year at Dropbox after HelloSign, and I'm a mom. I'm good at wearing a lot of hats, so I love working cross-functionally. I love the hyper growth, working with different teams. I like working with different age groups. I like, different generations. I like coaching. Again, I learned, very early in my career, the processes. And now that I've been in technology, I've worked for 3 Y Combinator companies. And so, I know how to build the infrastructure and, the sales playbooks. And, so I have a foundation that I can coach and teach and, help, founders build. But, so I love all of that. I love, I speak a lot, certainly on LinkedIn. Follow me on LinkedIn if you haven't, about compassionate leadership. And I really like coaching. I kind of take a different approach than some of maybe even the older, tech sales leaders, where, it was a little bit more of a cutthroat. I know there were some VPs of sales that had, like, there was one that I knew that had a rule of 5, and his philosophy was that, you hire 5 salespeople, 2 or 3 of them aren't going to be successful. So, get rid of them as quickly as you can and churn them over. I take a little bit of a different approach. I try to, when I have top producers on my team, I try to give them all the support and resources they need to just go be successful, and then really work on the weakest links and, try to really help. If you can bring up some of your bottom performers and get them to produce 50% more, get, closer to quota attainment, it can raise the entire ship. So, I really love, I think what makes me me excited about sales is that feeling we've all been in there at some point or another when things are going really well and you're dancing in the streets. And it's just I like the competition and inner team competition and, competing with other companies and, being the underdog against big, the David and Goliath companies. But I also love that feeling when you're winning as a team and, everybody's making money and everybody's doing well. And so, that's what I strive for. And, we hopefully get to those places at a couple of companies throughout our career where it's just a really exciting place to be.
Two questions to that. What are the traits and skills of a good salesperson? And I don't want to lead the witness, but is there any good salesperson that is not competitive?
Yes, there is. I've had, and I think that's one of the things is having, as a sales leader is figuring out what motivates different people. At HelloSign, I had a woman, she's now a mom and taking time off, but she was a top producer for me, but she was a kind of an independent worker, and she didn't like going head to head with other people on the team. And, so, it's understanding what's going to drive people. She would prefer for her motivation rather than getting in some sort of competition, and winning a dinner out or something. She'd rather have a day off with her family, so it's, understanding what drives different salespeople, sales. And you brought up a great point, and it's so interesting hearing you were an attorney before. And, I've had an opportunity now to work for multiple genius CEOs, that have come out of Princeton and Harvard and MIT. And, I was the only person on the leadership team at my last company that wasn't first generation Indian. And, I've worked for, a lot of technical engineering and product type CEOs who are geniuses. And I think in Silicon Valley, there is that underlying lack of respect for the sales function. And, and yet, and it's really challenging as a sales leader when you're navigating that, because if sales are going really well, oftentimes these founders think it's their vision and it's their brilliant product that is selling itself. It never sells itself. If sales aren't going well, it's the VP of sales, right? So it's the throat to choke in that world, so that's why, there's a lot of pressure in sales. But when it comes to hiring and recruiting, I go for a very different type of candidate than I would if I were hiring for an engineer or a product person or a marketing person. I want the candidates that are very comfortable with failure, and challenges, and have overcome challenges. I want the candidate that didn't get into their school, their dreams, or got cut from the sports team, or, that have that resilience to be able to come back and build, the grit, resilience, strength to overcome challenges and not be afraid to hear no. And I think it's a different DNA, from many of the other functions in tech companies.
Is it a different DNA, so much so that we're talking like you are born with it, or is it something that you learn because of the things that you go through, like not making the team or whatever? Where is it coming from? Do you think is it coming from experience? Is it coming from what they were born with? Is it coachable? Can you coach anyone to have that type of resilience and grit?
I think a little bit of all of the above. I think there are some traits that drive good salespeople, that might be inherent. It's not a hardened truth, but I think, typically many salespeople tend to be more extroverted and outgoing, and that's not always the case, but I think sometimes you learn that grit and resilience from life challenges that come your way. I think oftentimes, you get into sales and you find that you're really good at it from a different area, and especially if you get down that entrepreneurial journey like you're on, right? Like, you have to, if you're going to be a founder or a CEO of a technology company, even if you're an engineer, you're going to have to learn how to sell. You have to start out doing founder-led sales. And, I think that's oftentimes where the respect comes. A lot of people understand that it is probably the hardest thing to do in building.
It is. I'm definitely convinced, and that resilience to go through 99 no's until you get that yes.
Mhm.
It's just something that you know what I've seen. I've seen a lot of people that say I want to get into sales, and that you have the conversation of, okay, I can help you get into sales, but I want you to realize it's not pretty. I mean,
Right,
you have pretty moments, but most
right,
of the time it's not pretty moments. You're going to score home runs, you're going to win championships, whatever. It's going to be amazing eventually. That you have to
right.
build a lot, you have to invest a lot, you have to build up that resilience, etc., etc. And I see a lot of people that go like, yeah, I get it. 2 months into it, they crumble, right? Two
Right.
months, 3 months into
Right.
it, they crumble. Have you seen that in your
Right.
experience?
Absolutely. And I talked to my son about it too, because he's been an SDR for about a year and a half at a company. And, he's had some really, really great months. He's doing really well because he goes into the office 3 days a week. I think it's really hard for people who are in their first job after 2020 and they're getting into sales and they're working out of their house, completely. I think that's pretty challenging in this environment. But there was, he hit a slump. Every salesperson, the top salespeople in the world that I've ever known have hit slumps. I've certainly had bad months and good months, and it's understanding that that's part of the game, and just putting your head down and your blinders on and doing those repeatable activities. That's one of the things that it's like fitness and nutrition. If you just got to put your head down and do the daily activities and hit your metrics and hit your KPIs, and focus on what you can control, which is the quality of your presentation and the number of people that you talk to every day. And it'll be a cyclical thing, but you will get there and you'll have those good months. But it's not for the faint of heart either, because it starts over all the time, whether it's every month or every quarter. You might have the best year of your life, but at January, you're going to be at 0. Right. So,
Very true. How much of that repeatable process, which we keep bringing up and it's so important, right? And you learn a lot of that when you were at Wells Fargo and you were building that amazing line of business and you conquered the Northeast, and you learned how important that was as you were building that team, right? Um, how much has changed over the years into that process, or is it kind of similar, even if technology is aiding some of the parts of the process? How do you think
mhm.
about the process now compared to back then?
It's a process, right? And it has, I mean, the only thing that's really changed are the tools, and, you can learn the technology. And I always talk about this too, in terms of like career reentry. I coach people who are returning to the workforce after a career break, or, I do, that's more of a volunteer thing for me, but, I do a lot of speaking around career reentry. And, I've had actually a TEDx on it, which was on the topic of let them back in. You could teach the tools in a year, but you can't teach 20 years of experience in a year, right? So, having that repeatable process, and this is what it looked like when I was a mutual fund wholesaler. It was as simple as, having my daily, weekly, monthly activities mapped out, and this was in-person sales. So I made sure that I had 4 in-person meetings, a breakfast meeting, a mid-morning meeting, a lunch meeting, and an afternoon meeting. sometimes a dinner, 4 days a week. Typically it was Monday through Friday, every single week. I was always scheduled out 2 weeks in advance. I took my Fridays would be my office days where I would do my follow-up and my scheduling out 2 weeks in advance, and just making sure that, you have those meetings on the calendar in person, and it's always 2 weeks out, and making sure that those activities, and it got a lot more granular than that, but it was a playbook, it was a roadmap, right? And having that and following it is what got me to where I needed to be.
What's the scariest moment for a salesperson? Is it looking at an empty calendar?
Well, the scariest moment for a salesperson is looking at being at the bottom of the leaderboard, right? Looking at the team sales and you're at zero. That's the scariest part. But yeah, I mean, I think, when I encourage sellers, when they get to that point where, they're looking at a number, a big goose egg on their calendar, I mean, on the sales leadership board, or on the leaderboard, is looking at their activities, right? So, if you're looking at a calendar and there's nothing on it, then you've got a problem, and so you have to start digging in as a sales leader. Like, have you been doing your 100 calls a day? Have you been doing, 3 demos a day? Have you been, so whatever the KPIs or the metrics are, and it varies depending on what, segment you're selling into and all of that, but you have to have that all mapped out, right? So it's like, if you know that you're at a 20% conversion rate, and you need, a certain number, you have to do all the deal count modeling, and make sure that you're doing the activities and having the demos and the presentations that are going to get you to that number.
What's the relationship between, you were talking today, right? When you were building that team, the whole inbound concept, marketing inbound didn't exist, right? And now there are a lot of salespeople that are getting fed with inbound leads. What are your thoughts there? Do you think sales should rely on that inbound? Is there a place for it, but you still need hunters out there getting their own leads and working through their own leads? There are a million things said about that, right? There's people that go like, hey, just divide and conquer, have your best people should be fed the best opportunities because they will close them, and then you keep going, the second best, you feed them the second best opportunities. Some people say, they put it the other way around. What are your thoughts there on inbound and how you feed the sales team?
Yeah, well, I mean, inbound is great, right? Like, if you've got a good inbound engine, that's a dream for sellers, right? And so I think that, that is something we want, and that's something we strive for. But if I'm looking at it from the perspective of an individual seller, I think it's really critical. It's one of the things that's amazing to me about technology, and that whole SDR BDR function, is we give the hardest thing in sales to the least experienced people, which is outbounding and booking meetings. It's a lot easier for me to book a meeting than for my son to book a meeting. I could call a CEO and, they're going to take my call, where they might not take the call of somebody who doesn't have the network or the experience, right? So, we give a very hard task to inexperienced sellers. And I think, and the way the world is changing, and we are literally at a paradigm shift in sales, I believe. I mean, it's, with AI and, everything that is transpiring with the economy. And, I think for individual sellers, it's critical to be able to not be afraid, or to develop the skill set to build your own pipeline, and even if you do have a strong inbound, there's no harm, in learning those skills to build your own pipeline, because it's going to become more and more important. Even companies that are doing well are now having to outbound. And, I have had conversations with a lot of AEs that, almost feel like they're too important to do the SDR work, right? That would not be a candidate that I would want on my team. I want somebody who's not afraid to, even if we have plenty of inbound, I want somebody that is not too important to do any kind of task, right? Because I'm not. I mean, I'll do it, and as a founder, it's like basically you become an SDR again, right? You're,
Yeah.
and so you got to be able to take on any of the tasks, and it's like when what we've seen over the last 15 years is rising tides lift all boats, but when things get hard and things get grittier, it's going to be more and more critical for people to be able um, to be full sales cycle.
What's the best way today in 2024 with everything that's available for someone to build that pipeline, to build the network, right? For anyone in the audience, young SDRs that are listening, what can they do?
Yeah, I mean, one, revisit your playbook. Presuming your head of sales or your sales manager has a good playbook, revisit that playbook, because what I see in a lot of companies is that that maybe a sales leader will spend time writing this playbook and creating the playbook and defining the ICP and really, outlining all the steps that need to be taken. They train the team on it, and then everybody forgets about it, right? Revisit that playbook and, make sure that you're following the playbook. And, it's your diet. It's your, it's the things that are going to get you where you need to be, right? So, follow the process, follow the plan, make sure you have a plan, expand your network. I think we are in a position now, I have become friends with a lot of other technology sales leaders, in the world, and, building your network is going to be your net worth moving forward. There's so much noise out there. Follow the influencers, understand what they're saying, start building relationships, join communities. There's a lot of different communities out there, some free, some paid, in the sales world. Join those communities, build your network, understand your ICP, start connecting with people that are your ICP, on LinkedIn, and, start to establish credibility with those people. And, and that's sort of how you begin to start building your pipeline, and then, I think we also are in an environment where, this paradigm shift, I'm actually doing a game tomorrow. It's CXO games on the topic of AI, and will generative AI replace salespeople? And I think one of the things that we're hearing is that, it's not likely to replace salespeople, but sellers who learn how to adopt AI and AI tools might replace sellers. So learn what's out there, learn how you can use ChatGPT to help refine your messaging and your outbounding. Be a student of your profession, learn as much as you possibly can, because it's going to be critical moving forward.
I love what you're saying. I have on my own, I have mixed feelings about leveraging AI. Like, I want to leverage AI, but I also feel, and I wanted to get your opinion, that there is a risk of, like, it feels like it's becoming like the fast food of sales. And it's, like, let me give you an example. Worked with an SDR, and the SDR was great at leveraging AI, and he was using Taplio to come up with posts in LinkedIn, right? And Taplio, it's a tool that will go in there and tell you what are the posts that are getting the most views, and it will auto generate posts for you that supposedly will get the most engagement, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so many things out there, right? And I'm starting to see a lot of people that seem to just be putting out there, like, it feels like canned content, right? It's like, it's all the same, right? It feels the same. It's all the same. AI has a way of writing stuff. It's like losing personality, right? I look at you and I look at your posts and I look at your story and you have your unique thing going on, right?
Right.
So to me, I think the challenge is how can you leverage AI but still be unique? Don't, I mean,
Right.
still trust your uniqueness that it's going to help you build relationships and create genuine relationships where people are going to remind you because of something that maybe was a little bit weird, right?
Right.
Or maybe it was a little bit out of place, but you have that going on for you, right? I was
Right.
as you know, I got into the old boys club. I was a stay-home mom, and then I got back into the game, and I got into technology, and I was the oldest person in the room, but I got there and I founded a company, and it's you. It's super unique, right? What are your
Right.
thoughts on that, and what are your thoughts? What will be your comment for the younger generations that are, kind of looking at all the influencers and everything and all the tools that exist and maybe are hesitant about telling their own story?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that's where, I think AI can augment, you can use it to augment, the sales function, right? But not replace. And that's, because if you replace it, you're going to lose that voice, right? You have to have, and that's, I mean, I get, and I'm sure you do as well, Mateo, I get a million, LinkedIn messages that I ignore because they're just bots, or they're SDRs pasting bots, and it's, you have, AI, certain tools with AI can get you maybe 80% there, but you can't lose your voice. In fact, it's more important than ever to have your own voice. And I mean, I can look at a post and I can tell right away that that was just a chat GPT list of, you know, top 10 things sellers need to worry about or something, it's like, there's no authenticity there. Right. And so I think it's going to be even more and more important moving forward to have your authentic voice. And, I think part of, it's hard for a lot of people. And I think one of the things I'm finding, I'm just like, as I'm kind of putting myself out there more and more and in this founder function and, trying to post daily on LinkedIn. And, I mean, I think part of it is the challenges I've had in my life and, nobody hits 50 unscathed. Right. So I don't care. Like I have nothing to lose. Like I can be vulnerable. Like, don't be afraid to be vulnerable and authentic because that is what resonates with people. It's like no one's perfect. Everybody's had their challenges. We're all facing, a world that's mind blowing right now, and changing faster than we can keep up with it. And mental health and mental well-being is a big problem. I see like as they say, the kids are not okay. There's a lot of challenges in the world, right? So, and a lot of that comes down to technology, and make sure that you're getting outside and you're engaging with people and you're, being a human, and that's what we're going to need to stand out for sure. And so if you are leveraging AI, I encourage you to leverage AI, but get it there and edit it and bring your, make it your own. And maybe you disagree with it, then don't be afraid, to challenge it because, it's going to be the human voice that resonates with people.
Beautiful. Um, let's go back a little bit to sales compete and what problem are you trying to solve? What led you to founding Sales Compete? And how are you trying to solve that problem?
Yeah, so Sales Compete came about. My co-founder is he has another company. He's based out of New York. And in 2020, he's a CEO. He lost his head of sales. So he ended up with 7 salespeople reporting to him. And so he built Sales Compete for himself. And it is a Slack app that provides, performance tracking, real-time coaching and feedback, and gamification, motivation, all within Slack. And it saved him as a sales leader. It saved him 10 to 15 hours a week from having to track down metrics, because that's where the sales team is in Slack. And as a sales leader, oftentimes we tend to live in the CRM or we live on dashboards, right? But that's not where that's not where you're engaging with your sales team. So it saved him 10 to 15 hours a week from having to track down metrics. And then he also saw that the activities, the number of calls and, just because of the gamification and the competition, he saw an increase of 30% in activities, KPIs from his team. And so he organically put it out there and got a couple of customers. So it was actually about March of 2023, last year, he came looking for a co-founder and we were introduced by somebody. And I just love the product because, I see not only as a sales leader, some of the challenges, that we have. It was very difficult for me to be in Slack as a sales leader because I'm on back-to-back one-on-ones, or I'm on sales calls, or I'm in the CRM, and there's questions and things being missed in Slack. So, it really helps me as a sales leader to have this tool. But I also see, again, having my son, who's a sales SDR, and again, so many sellers have really struggled in remote and hybrid environments. And we do have customers that are in office, fully in office, that use Sales Compete, but I just think it's such an ideal solution to keep you engaged and feeling like part of a team. So we've had some fun with it, and our customers love it. We are very early stage, and we have out-of-the-box integrations with HubSpot, Outreach, and SalesLoft. So as long as you have one of those tools, we do have customers that use Salesforce, but they also will use Outreach or one of those other solutions. So we have an integration out of the box, very easy to set up, and it's a great tool.
And I love it. And then you create kind of a healthy competition that it's bringing it back, some of the stuff that used to happen in the office. And even if you are in the same office, I mean, you can be like everywhere, right? I mean, so it helps those teams as well. Is there a healthier type of competition, and how do you bring that healthier type of competition versus, is there a competition that is not healthy in a sales team? When is it healthy? When is it not healthy?
Yeah, I think it depends a lot on the sales leader. I mean, I say this in every role, and I talk to people who are, job searching or looking to get back to work. I mean, to me, and this is my experience, the single most important thing about job happiness is who you report directly to. They either have your back or they don't. And that's something that sellers need. I mean, sellers, typically sellers, are oftentimes very motivated by money, you have to be, but also, they like recognition. They like, they like to feel supported. We all do, as humans. You want to be supported in your role. And if you feel like your leader has your back, you're really going to want to work hard and, and not let them down. I mean, I've done that for leaders that I've respected. It just makes me want to give my best work, aside from actually closing the deals. And so, I think making an environment where it's fun and it's competitive. I mean, we sold Sales Compete to one company, and they had no budget. People are cutting their budget. And so there are a lot of different features without getting into it. In Sales Compete, we have the ability to do power hours and, challenges. And, I always joke, like with my boys, I could have gotten them to fold laundry if I could make it a competitive sport. Right. So, it's like fun things, but we can put spiffs and tie prizes and things into these different features that we have in Sales Compete. And we had one company that didn't have a budget for spiffs. They bought the solution, so we can have this like Wheel of Fortune prize thing in Sales Compete. And so he came up with a really creative way to make spiffs. Like, on some of the options for the spiff prizes was, your manager will source an opportunity for you. You can steal an opportunity from one of your peers. You could, get one of his sales team members does beatboxing. He will do a custom beatbox for you, So it was like just coming up with fun ways to get the team engaged.
That sounds like fun. That sounds like fun. Have you ever thought about there are so many things that are not called sales, but are similar to sales. Let's think about one, recruiting. You have a group of recruiters and they are selling the job to a potential candidate, et cetera, et cetera. Have you ever thought about leveraging compete sales for different type of professions, even if they are not called sales?
I mean, we certainly could. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the key is that you have to have, we pull our metrics out of HubSpot or Outreach or SalesLoft, right? So you have to have those KPIs in there. But I mean, yes, recruiters are 100% salespeople. And this is what I try to tell, I try to coach people that I know. And I know there's I've had a lot of very, very talented colleagues over the last 6 months reach out to me because they were impacted by layoffs, right? And it's like, even if you're from the product side or the engineering side, getting a job is sales. You're just selling yourself,
Yeah,
right? So focus on, your presentation and, how you pitch yourself and, you're the product and how many, jobs you apply to and how many interviews you get and preparing for those. And, there are a lot of functions that are sales. We're really focused primarily, and this is what I would coach a lot of my founders is like really narrow down your ICP, so of course, right now, our perfect ideal customer is somebody that, of course, is the user of HubSpot or Outreach or SalesLoft, but also, of course, Slack. You have to have Slack because we're entirely native in Slack. And, typically wanting to create that kind of sales floor energy.
got it. I'm going to ask you a weird question now. If money wasn't a problem and if sales was out of the picture, what would you like to be? And let me explain why. Sometimes I dream about just like maybe like having a restaurant or having a small shop where I, do XYZ type of food or just being a full-time musician or whatever. And then I always fall back to like, hey, I'm not that good at that. I wouldn't make any money. I wouldn't be able to feed my family, right? But do you have any of those like dreams? Like you go like, hey, I could do this, and then you go like, oh, maybe no.
Yeah, I mean, I'm finding, at this stage of my career and I'm really focused, and you hear a lot more people talking about energy, and it's like, and I'm recognizing like, we all have things about our jobs that we don't love to do, right? It's life, like for everything we do, right? But it's like I really try to pay attention to what lights me up and what gets me excited. And one of the things that I'm really enjoying, and a lot of it I've been doing volunteer, is kind of the motivational speaking and and I think trying to help. I even like love coaching and helping my kids' friends that are kind of making their way in the industry. And so I really enjoy that, and I think that's something that I'd like to do more and more of. Then there's the other side of the coin that we all get from time to time, and sometimes I just want to lay in a meadow and watch clouds go by, go sit on a beach. Right?
You were picking up surfing lately. Are you still surfing? Has that become a part of your life?
Well, so, it's interesting because I moved down to Southern California. And so I had gone surfing a few times before going to Surf and Sales with Richard Harris and Scott Leese, which was a blast. And it was much easier to learn to surf there because the water is so warm and beautiful, and they had great instructors in Costa Rica. But right now, even in San Diego, which is beautiful, the water temperature is a little cold. So I'm probably going to wait. I haven't been since I got back from surf and sales, and I'll probably wait maybe until March and then try to get back out there.
Very good. Any other hobbies that you have when you're not working?
I've got these two dogs, and so I love to hike and you know, and spend time outdoors hiking and walking on the beach with the dogs. That's something I just really love to do. You know, I, like a lot of people during the pandemic, tried to come up with a lot of different hobbies, and still trying to engage in a lot of different things. So
Very good. Elizabeth, this has been amazing. I appreciate you wanting to be here, sharing your story. I follow you on LinkedIn. I love the advice that you provide there. And I feel like I get a lot of value from you just by following you in LinkedIn. I get a lot of value from you. So for everyone in the audience, just, uh, it's worth it, definitely worth the investment, and you will get value every time out of it. So thank you so much for being here, and I hope that we can get to do this sometime again in the future.
thank you so much, Mateo. That means the world to me. It's good to know that some of the things I put out there are resonating, and I appreciate you. Thank you so much for reaching out. This has been loads of fun.